Hello students, I'm Siraj Khan, lecturer in English Cast. Welcome to my subject Shakespearean Studies. Our course code is 4262 and it's our lecture number 17. Today we are talking about Shakespeare and the Renaissance. When Shakespeare was working in the theatre, the Renaissance movement in the arts was speaking in England. The new openness and humanism are reflected in Shakespeare's plays. Broadly speaking, like the Renaissance period is used to describe the era when Europeans moved away from the restrictive ideas of Middle Ages. The ideology that dominated the Middle Ages was heavily focused on the absolute power of God and was enforced by the formidable Roman Catholic Church. From the 14th century onward, people started to break away from this idea. In fact, Shakespeare himself may have been Catholic. The Renaissance cultural creators did, however, question humankind's relationship to God. This questioning produced enormous upheaval in the accepted social hierarchy, and the new focus on humanity created newfound freedom for artists, writers, and philosophers to be inquisitive about the world around them. They often drew on the more human centered classical writing and art of ancient Greece and Rome for inspiration. The Renaissance arrived in England rather late. Shakespeare was born toward the end of the broader Europe wide Renaissance period. Just as it was peaking in England, he was one of the first playwrights to bring the Renaissance core values to the theatre. Shakespeare updated the simplistic two-dimensional writing style of pre-Renaissance drama. He focused on creating human characters with psychological complexity, as Hamlet is perhaps the most famous example of this. The upheaval in social hierarchy allowed Shakespeare to explore the complexity and humanity of every character, regardless of their social position. Even monarchs were portrayed as having human emotions and were capable of making terrible mistakes. Consider King Lear and Macbeth. Shakespeare utilized his knowledge of Greek and Roman classics when writing his plays. Before the Renaissance, these texts had been suppressed by the Catholic Church. The outlines first of all, we'll talk about William Shakespeare, his early life and career, his language, the Renaissance, the Globe Theatre history, the reconstruction of the Globe Theatre, Macbeth writing patronage, Macbeth, the curse, and its theme. William Shakespeare was born in April 1564 and died in April 1616. Parents understood all walks of life and social classes. Father was a clever and a leather merchant. Mother was Elaine Harris, which put them in the working class but with benefits and respect. Family married Anne Hathaway in 1582. He was 18 while she was 26 and pregnant. Three kids: Susanna, twins Hammett and Judith. His acting career started in 1594, actor, writer, and a managing partner for the Lord Chamberlain's Men's Company, LCM Company, acting company patronized by royalty and popular by the public. William Shakespeare wrote 154 sonnets, two epic narratives in 38 plays, including comedies, Twelfth Night, Measure for Measure, Taming of the Shrew. We are having histories, Henrys and Richards, and tragedies, Hamlet, King Lear, and Othello. Elizabethan England endured a different form of religious oppression than that which had dominated the Middle Ages when Queen Elizabeth first took the throne. She forced conversions and drove practicing Catholic underground with her imposition of the Regency Acts. These laws required citizens to attend worship in Anglican churches if discovered Catholics faced step penalties or even deaths. Despite these laws, Shakespeare did not appear to be afraid to write about Catholicism nor to present Catholic characters in a favorable light. His inclusion of Catholicism in his works has led historians to hypothesize that the bard was secretly Catholic. Catholic characters included Friar Francis, Much Ado About Nothing, Friar Lawrence, Romeo and Juliet, and even Hamlet himself. At the very least, Shakespeare's writing indicates a thorough knowledge of Catholic rituals, regardless of what he may have been doing secretly. He maintained a public persona as an Anglican. He was baptized and buried at Holy Trinity Church, Stratford upon Avon, Protestant church. Late romances is The Tempest. Known for prose, witty poetry, and blank verse, rhymed, iambic, pentameter. No dictionaries or grammar books learned from other educated writers, credited with introducing 3,000 plus words, phrases into the language. Bedroom, dawn, gossip, gloomy, fashionable, bump, cold-blooded, break the ice, breathe his last, dog will have his day, good riddance, scent packing, seen better days, heart of gold. The language he used, only one generation from what we speak today. Reading hence as thou you test it is. And don't pronounce the apostrophe at the end of words like apostrophes are for other vowels. For example, can't I, the adage, Kate in the adage. And the only thing that is different from modern time is the word order in which the characters speak. Like, for example, for thou art night, for you are close. Elizabethan drama turned away from religious subjects and began more sophisticated plays drawing from the ancient Romans and Greek. Many tragedies hero hit with disaster, carefully crafted, unrhymed, rich language, vivid imagery. As William Shakespeare was among the people who brought about a lot of changes during the Renaissance period in England and transformed literature, thus affecting later culture. Is usually referred to as the Renaissance man due to the contribution he had on the lives of people during this period. As stated earlier, there were a lot of cultural changes during this period and a language that he picked. Renaissance, Queen Elizabeth 1558 1603, England emerges as naval and commercial power of Western world after defeating the Spanish Armada. England formally established the Church of England, which attacks Catholics and witches. The COE began with her father Henry VIII after a disagreement with the Pope over whether or not he could be granted a divorce. There were Catholic plots to kill Queen Elizabeth since she was from her father's second marriage. Catholics wished to crown Mary Scott, her cousin, instead. And Mary Scott was eventually imprisoned for 19 years and then beheaded. James VI of Scotland and Mary Scott's son is crowned as James I of England. In 1605, gunpowder plot, Catholics plot to blow up king and parliament. Guy Fawkes rented a cellar under the House of Lords where he stored 36 barrels of gunpowder. This unsuccessful act increased Catholic persecution until this day in England. November 5th is known as Guy Fawkes Day. The English burned dummies of Guy and set off fireworks to celebrate. James I of England, 1607, Jamestown settled, 1611, King James Bible published, which trials continue. The Globe Theatre history is in 1576 known as the Theatre. 1594 closed briefly for the plague, and in 1599 tore down and dragged across the Thames River after a legal dispute, and in 1613 burnt down from a fire started by a cannon shot during a Henry VIII performance, one of Shakespeare's dramas. In 1642, officially closed by Puritan regime and run predominantly by the Lord Chamberlain's Men Company. Theatre's construction: open octagon, 3 stories high, 100 feet in diameter. The Globe Theatre fits 3,000 spectators and microcosm of London. Pit, 1 pence, groundlings, peasants, standing room only, fruit and nuts sold. 3 tiers, 2 pence, upper class seating, and the seating arrangements behind stage royalty so everyone could see them. No real scenery, and audience goes off of exaggerated language and moment, and the effects were that trapdoors, balcony entrances, rope rigging, etc., and fireworks, lightning, rolled cannon balls, thunder, and plays performed during the day for lightning 2 to 5 p.m. Action actors were only men, no women. Young boys played the roles of women. Macbeth writing patronage. The play Macbeth was written specifically for King James I. He was obsessed with demonology, the idea of magic and witches, and experienced the gunpowder plot and assassination attempt. In Scottish history, it is loosely based on the career of King Macbeth of Scotland. Macbeth, the commander under King Duncan I, murdered Duncan in 1040 and claimed the kingdom for himself. After a rule of 17 years, Macbeth was killed by Duncan's son Malcolm, who later became King Malcolm III. Who was written as a good guy since King James I was one of his descendants, and short because the king liked short plays. The real Macbeth, King Duncan, Markham, Banquo, and Lady Macbeth all lived in the hundreds, bewolves times, 1000s. Macbeth, the curse. What was the curse? Supposedly saying the name Macbeth inside a theatre will bring bad luck to the play and anyone acting in it. The only exception is when the word is spoken as a line in the play. People actually refer to the play as the Scottish play or Mac when at the theatre. And why it started, in order to please King James I, Shakespeare casted his imagination aside and used a real 17th century black magic ritual for the opening scene of Macbeth's Act 4, a sort of how-to for budding witches without changing an ingredient. He provided his audience with step-by-step instructions of how to create a real spell. The ritual's practitioners were not amused by this detailed public exposure of their witchcraft. It is said as punishment they cast an everlasting spell on the play and turning it into the most ill-starred of all theatrical productions. How to avoid the curse? In order to reverse the bad luck, the person who uttered the word must exit the theatre, spin around 3 times saying profanity, and then ask for permission to return inside. Some believe that you can repeat the words thrice around the circle bound, you will sink into the ground. Macbeth, proof of the curse. First Macbeth performance ever, beginning with its first performance in 1606. Dear Will himself was forced to play Lady Macbeth when Hal Berridge, the boy designated to play the lady, became inexplicably feverish and died. Moreover, the bloody play so displeased King James I that he banned it for 5 years. Amsterdam, 1672, the actor playing Macbeth substituted a real dagger for the blunted stage one and with it killed Duncan in full view of the entranced audience. Lady Macbeth incident. Sarah Siddons was early ravaged by a disapproving audience in 1775. Sybil Thorndike was almost strangled by a burly actor in 1926. Diana Wynyard sleepwalked off the rostrum in 1948, falling down 15 feet. New York, 1849, during its performance at New York's Astor Place, a riot broke out in which 31 people were trampled to death. Macbeth was mugged soon after the play's opening. USA, 1937, when Laurence Olivier took on the role of Macbeth, a 25-pound stage weight crashed within an inch of him, and his sword, which broke on stage, flew into the audience and hit a man who later suffered a heart attack. 1934, British actor Malcolm Keane turned mute on stage, and his replacement, Alistair Sim, like Hal Berich before him, developed a high fever and had to be hospitalized. 1942, the Macbeth production, headed by John Gielgud, three actors, Duncan and two witches, died, and the costume and set designer committed suicide amidst his devilish Macbeth creations. Bermuda, 1952, Charlton Heston, in an outdoor production, suffered severe burns in his groin and leg area from tights that were accidentally soaked in kerosene. Recent years, an actor's strike fell tons. 1970 production in New York City, two fires and seven robberies plagued the 1971 version starring David Leary. Act first. Terms: Elizabethan drama plays that turn away from religious subjects and begins to model ancient Greeks and Roman play with sophisticated plots. Tragedy, serious play in which the chief figures, through peculiarity of character, pass through a series of misfortunes, eventually leading to a catastrophe and downfall. Act first. Happiness through two. Conflict begins. Shakespearean climax. Act 3. Conflict could have been avoided but isn't. Act 4. Downfall, catastrophe. And Act 5. Consequences, aftermath. Aside, a convention in drama whereby a character on stage addresses the audience to reveal some inner thought or feeling inaudible to other characters on stage. Macbeth, the greatest is behind us. Thanks for your pains. Aside to Bung, do you not hope your children will be kings? Soliloquy, a monologue delivered by a character while alone on stage, revealing inner thoughts, emotions, or some other information the audience needs to know. Prophecy, predicted occurrence, or fate. Paradox, a statement which reveals a kind of truth which at first seems contradictory. Macbeth setting, Scotland. Inverness, Macbeth's castle near Dunsinane in Burnham Woods. And 5. Macduff's castle in Carder in Glamis territories in Scotland, England, Ireland, and Norway. The characters we are having: weird sisters, first, second, and third witch, supernatural entities. Weird Old English is weird Scottish fate, and Duncan, king of Scotland, and Marcount, Duncan's oldest son, Macbeth, Thane of Glamis, and Thane, feudal lord, and then Banco, commander with Macbeth, and captain of Scotland's army. Angus, Lennox, and Ross, Scottish nobles. Act 2 terms: Hamasha, hubris, example of a tragic flaw, having excessive pride, and a tragic flaw that leads to a character's downfall. Divine right of rule, God appoints, chooses a person to reign as king. Internal conflict, inside personal forces is Macbeth and Lady Macbeth. External conflict, external or outside forces with Macbeth. Comic relief, humorous scene or passage inserted into an otherwise serious work. Emotional outlet for audience to contrast seriousness of work. Anadolosis, Greek for dubbing, repeating the last word of a clause at the beginning of the next clause. In Sciarra, fear leads to anger, anger leads to hatred, and hatred leads to conflict, conflict leads to suffering. Macbeth themes we are having: whether supernatural, witches and deaths, appearance versus reality, people look and pretend to be different than their inner emotions, motives. There is no art to find the mind's construction in the face. Look like the innocent flower, but be the serpent under it. Be innocent of the knowledge there is Jack, and put myself to thy direction and unspeak my own detraction. This was my false speaking. Manhood and masculinity led the Macbeth and Macduff. Fate versus free will. In predestination or choice, did Macbeth speed up process in killing Duncan, or will it happen anyway? Was it in the cards for Macbeth to kill him? Fate and free will. Macbeth made the decision to kill Duncan and take things into his own hands. Ambition. Macbeth's hamasha leads to his downfall. Character list we are having settling in Scotland, King Duncan, Markham in Dunalbain, Macbeth in Panko, and nobles Lennox, Ross, Angus, and Menteith in England. We are having King Edward, Severd, young Severd, and Markham, and Macduff. Supernatural is the witches. The parents can be deceiving, which is paradox, fool is fair, and fair is foul. Fate versus free will, ambition. Macbeth's hamasha ambition drives him to his downfall. Terms to know not already mentioned. Elizabethan drama, Shakespearean tragedy and comic relief, soliloquy, internal and external conflict, background information on Shakespeare in his time. We have already discussed all of these in the previous lectures. Thank you very much and good luck.